Mr. Chairman, let me take the cards on ELD and CPIB on behalf of the Prime Minister. First, may I thank Mr. Png Eng Huat for your confidence on the secrecy of our voting processes. And I also like to thank you for your support for the ELD's recent innovation for e-registration and the refinements to the layout of our voting booth. We note your suggestions on the design of the booths and the reading out of the names. Let me make a few clarifications. First, on the booth design, we will continually refine the booth design with our stakeholders. We actually have a new prototype for PE 2017, and we'll continue to refine this as we go along. On the second issue, we note your suggestion on the reading out of the names. May I just clarify that we don't read out the NRIC of the voters. What we do is that we read out the name and the serial number of the voter's name in the polling station register. Okay? So we thank you for all these suggestions, and we will take into account all these suggestions in the next review of the Parliamentary Elections Act. And if I may inform the House that ELD has actually conducted roadshows and plan to introduce e-registration at a few constituencies during the PE 2017. However, as PE 2017 was not contested, ELD's current plan is to implement e-registration of voters at the next election. On the issue of CPIB and anti-corruption, let me first thank Mr. Murali and Mr. Dennis Tan for your various suggestions. CPIB is acutely aware of the evolving challenges of corruption, and we can never be complacent. We must always be vigilant, especially in the current era where issues straddle beyond our sovereign territory. I thank both members for your various suggestions, which CPIB will take into account in our regular reviews. And we will do what is possible and practical to uphold the integrity of our system, especially in the face of transnational cross-border challenges. Now, Singapore is recognized as one of the least corrupt countries in the world today. The latest Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index of 2017, where Singapore was ranked 6th out of 180 countries, was again testament to the effectiveness of our anti-corruption framework. The corruption situation in Singapore remains under control. However, we must not be complacent. As we say, low crime doesn't mean no crime. This can be seen from the corruption statistics released by CPIB in recent years, which show that Singapore has one of the world's lowest incidents of corruption. Nevertheless, while the absolute numbers are low, we note that the majority of the cases come from the private sector. This is why the CPIB recognizes that it is important to engage the private and business sectors to enhance their awareness of anti-corruption measures and to share the best practices with them, as suggested by Mr. Dennis Tan. I will share some recent efforts by the CPIB. In 2016, the CPIB published a guidebook for private sector use called PACT, or a practical anti-corruption guide for businesses in Singapore, which sets out to guide business owners in developing and implementing an anti-corruption framework within their companies. Members may also be aware of ISO 37001, the anti-bribery management system that was launched in October 2016. This is a newly developed international standard to help businesses and companies implement anti-bribery compliance programs. Supported by Spring Singapore, the CPIB was the national convener and led a national working group comprising representatives from the trade associations, industry bodies, and academia to develop the standard. The Singapore standard ISO 37001 anti-bribery management system was subsequently launched in April 2017 in a seminar organized by the CPIB in partnership with Spring Singapore. The CPIB continues to be proactive in engaging the private sector. It conducts regular prevention talks and also periodically participates in business sector conferences in its anti-corruption efforts. Now, enhancing anti-corruption measures in companies ultimately require constructive public-private sector cooperation and partnership. Companies must realize that they are ultimately responsible for the proper and ethical conduct of their businesses and recognize that they also play a vital role in our national anti-corruption efforts in preventing detecting, and reporting corrupt behavior. Let me now turn to the Prevention of Corruption Act. The PCA is a key instrument in our national anti-corruption framework. It is thus pertinent that the PCA is periodically reviewed to ensure that it remains relevant and effective in combating corruption, especially on some of the issues raised by both members that concerns trans-border issues. The last substantial review of and amendments of the PCA was in 1989. The amendments then included increasing the maximum fines for several offences under the PCA and adding an offence of giving false information. Since the 1989 review, the landscape and context in which corrupt offenders operate has changed. The modus operandi of corrupt offenders have evolved and corrupt transactions of transnational nature have become more prevalent. Our PCA has to remain effective to deal with the many manifestations of corrupt practices and conduct. In this context, the CPIB and the AGC have been reviewing the PCA. This exercise involves a careful study of the current PCA to establish areas where amendments, refinements, and updates may be necessary. And I'd like to thank both members for raising the worthy issues of consideration in the review of the PCA. A review of the PCA is an important undertaking and will include the comprehensive engagement of different stakeholders and a public consultation to ensure that feedback is solicited in an exhaustive, comprehensive, and wide-ranging manner. It goes without saying that all members of Parliament will have the opportunity to contribute your feedback and suggestions at the appropriate juncture as we seek to enhance our legislative tools to fight corruption. Thank you.